Welcome to Property Quorum. Well, welcome one and all once more to Property Quorum, a gathering of people far cleverer than me to talk about a topic that I know very little about. Marvellous. Property and in the round. And today's topic is called Safe, Suitable and Seen. And I think really, rather than I describe why we're talking about it, I'm going to throw Hamish, as ever, mercilessly under the bus.
Well, in our efforts to educate at least Gareth in matters to do with property and to do with what we're trying to do ahead of the game, is to discuss this week something we didn't have time to really fully answer. We're very kindly approached last week with somebody questioned us, getting way towards the end of what we were actually speaking on the subject then. And they asked the question that really within all the planning strategies that we had, were we taking into consideration that which needed to be put in place to support those who weren't in the best position to actually really sort things for themselves fully? They could do with an additional bit of support. That could be the elderly. That could be those that have mobility challenges, whether that be physical or mental challenges. Are we, in our planning strategies, are we doing as much for people as we could? Now, it's built into certain standards that are available within planning. There are all sorts of strategies that could be done. And it's glossed over briefly because these things can be done. However, the real question is, what are we actually doing to look after a population which is becoming more and more elderly, certainly, and looking to keep those with limited mobility, really enabling them to sort of continue with their independence, rather than trying to sort of say, right, we'll stick you in here, that's where you need to go, because there's loads of other people doing exactly the same thing, which can tend to be a way. And interestingly enough, we very often find that some of the homes that are established, we will actually put in the elderly into those homes, whether it been not many of them on the ground floor, of course, because you can only hold a certain number, but we'll also put those with mobility challenges into those same places, instead of trying to create the mixture that really society ought to be trying to provide a way forward for.
Juliet, welcome. Mobility challenges, our aging population. This has got to play a strong part in the way in which property sales move forward, yes?
Oh, absolutely. I remember buying a flat. It was on the top floor of a building. And I remember the lawyer sending me my report on title saying, there is no lift. So if your intention is to live here for the rest of your life, you've got to consider, when you're elderly, will you be able to use the stairwell? Because you've got quite a few flights of stairs to use. And I mean, this was many, many years ago. I looked at that and I thought, what are they talking about? Like, that wasn't even something that I envisioned. Whereas now what we're saying is, look, policymakers, you've got the elderly, you've got disenfranchised people. And Hamish is right. It's not just about people with certain physical disabilities, but you've got lots of mental disabilities as well. So people look physically normal, but they've got these disabilities, and you've got to cater for that. And, just coming on from last week, my concern here is we haven't even got people in the local authority who answer phone calls or answer emails when you reach out to them. So they're clearly understaffed. So even if, there were to be policies made, how are they going to police this? How are they going to move forward if they just haven't got the budgets for it? And we need to move away from a thinking where we're seeing to be done something. We actually need to make real differences to people's lives. And that, to me, is where real change comes in. It's not just about chucking out a white paper and saying, oh, this is what we intend to do and this is how we intend to do it. How do you really intend to deliver it? And what are your handicaps, pardon the pun, but what are your handicaps insofar as not being able to deliver? Because if you currently haven't got the budget to police some of the planning permissions that you currently issue, etc., how are you going to, for example, we spoke last week about those fines. How are they going to police that? Is that going to mean increased council tax for the rest of us, or increased taxes? Are they going to, milk some of the population to fund what they intend to do. How does that knock-on effect help? And that is my concern. It's all great to have these policies, but how do you intend to give effect to them and deliver what you say you will?
Good Lord. What a salvo. Wendy, so our situation is that we've got this aging population. We haven't had a roaring number of new houses to be built for them. So does that mean there's a challenge on to find places for them to be?
There definitely is a huge challenge. I think, I've got a friend who happens to live in council housing, and she has a disability. She's got a blue badge. She's been waiting for years and years to actually get a ground floor flat just because she can't tackle the stairs. You also have to ask the question, in a block of flats, if all the people on the top floors are either elderly and or have limited mobility, and there happens to be a fire, how are they going to get out? Yes, we have limited resources here in the UK in terms of we don't have more land growing. We have a finite amount of land, which means that we have to build upwards. But we also need to be mindful of the fact that there are people out there who have limited mobility. They might need to live in a property with wider door frames to accommodate wheelchairs. They might need to have bathroom or bathing facilities, at least on the ground floor. That, I've actually noticed, is a trend which has been happening quite well over the years anyway, more to do with the fact that families demand having a bathroom on the ground floor for young children. But we could do so much better as a society.
Well, we're talking about doing better as a society, someone who's at the sharp end, Chris, with our ever-increasing number of people, it seems, that have some form of disability, visible or not, mental or physical, as well as our aging population. Is that not a challenge for someone who produces HMOs like yourself to step up to?
Yeah. You know what? I hosted a meeting with a fellow investor who is in the country from Hong Kong, looking to invest into some of the projects that we do, the types of things that we do. And she was aghast at the level of bureaucracy here. I know that we have limited resources in terms of land and things like that, but from their perspective, we've got loads of land, loads of space compared to this tiny city here over in Asia.
Absolutely.
But yeah, she was just aghast at the length of time, the amount of bureaucracy and all the planning regulations and rules, and that we have all this red tape. And yeah, so it was just an interesting seeing it from a different person's perspective, and outside looking in, I guess. But yeah, we absolutely have some massive challenges ahead. So just this morning, I've been appraising some new potential sites based on a new relationship that we're looking to build, or are building with a supported housing provider. And their focus is helping the local authorities with their statutory requirements with providing housing for people with learning disabilities, autism, that type of thing. And the numbers actually work on these schemes, but the only reason the numbers work is because of the rent rates that you can get for these particular schemes that will allow a developer to amortize it over such a long period of time. It comes down to the financials ultimately. At some point, someone's got to pay to put that scheme into place. And if there isn't a return there, a profit-driven return, you're not going to get the private sector being able to help. Now, I think that you can get the private sector to help if we can work out the financials in a reasonable way that's profit-making. Alternatively, if it's not going to be profit-making, you'd need the likes of the government to step in and provide that type of sinking fund for these developments to happen, and then to retain them on the books and provide them in perpetuity.
Hamish, as someone who deals with part of the process, the inner machinations of the closing of a property deal, surely, as dear friend Chris points out, the vast amount of red tape that we've got going on is not exactly lessened by the complexity of some of these searches. And when you're dealing with, again, the aging population, a population that is more and more less able than they used to be, surely time is an enormous factor.
Well, I mean, that is, I mean, outside of what we do, which is fairly minimal in terms of the overall picture, nor can we, in the type of work that we do, influence what goes on in the overall picture. But it does actually point itself to more support being given to those who do want to buy into properties, who do suffer from one or other. I say suffer, it's part of life. And many people who have mobility challenges, they won't admit that you cannot see it, you cannot sort of feel it within them. And therefore, a lot of it is unseen. And a lot of people, they want to keep on this brave face, but it's not so much a brave face. They want to feel as though they have an element of freedom about their life. And if we impose restrictions because we are not in ourselves building for these people and preparing for these people, then the most significant aspect is, and Chris really he actually almost sort of put it in a nutshell there, is to do with finance. When you look now, and sorry to bring the topic up, but when you look at the billions that have been set aside to put down what we call those who've come to this country, and we are currently investigating how or why they've come here, is probably a good way of putting it, rather than putting a name to it. We have put billions aside there, and the government have been able to amass all of these funds to put them into hotels, to actually now start putting them in houses of multiple occupation. Yet I haven't seen anything anywhere suggested that why don't we put, along with those billions, why don't we put just a couple of billion alongside so we can help those with mobility issues, so we can actually look after that part of our own society that has been living here for half a century, 3/4 of a century, and some of them even getting on for a century. Wouldn't it be fair to be looking after those as well?
Juliet, do you think, as Hamish seems to allude, that we suffer from dog whistle politics, where people they're attending the issue that everybody's jumping up and down about, whereas behind the scenes, we've got all these people who have historically been here and are still not ably housed for their disabilities?
You know, you've got a sector of society that's disenfranchised, and that can be anything. And these people haven't got a voice, and the people that we currently have voicing these people's needs, etc., aren't doing a very good job of it. Because, you know, if you've got mobility issues, I went to a charity dinner, a charity lunch a couple of months ago. It was by the Variety Children's Charity, and they are providing wheelchair access for children with disabilities, and they're now able to live normal lives as a result of just a small thing, just a wheelchair being added, you know. And it's important as a society that we have people who are disenfranchised, you know, in sort of the generalistic term, being made to feel normal, or being made to have as normal a life as possible. And I go back to, I mean, I grew up in the West Indies. The West Indies is considered a third world developing country. And, you know, they still have programs there where they deal with disenfranchised people. So it's phenomenal when Chris says you've got someone from another country coming in, looking at what we've got and being, you know, flabbergasted by the fact that we're not doing better. And so maybe, just maybe, you know, we step away from the British way and we get, you know, some external opinions to come in and give us ideas of how best to deal with these things. Because sometimes other communities, other societies, I think in Germany, there's a phenomenal, you know, policy that you will not see, like people living in, you know, people living in certain areas and not having the needs met. Like the policies are phenomenal. And I think it's like, I don't know what you call them, but it's like a styrotext type development where all of the requirements that a disabled person can require is there, you know. And to me, just looking at what other societies are doing is really important. We've got to sort of get our heads out of the sand and sort of think, well, what we've been doing so far hasn't been working. So how do we change things up so we we deliver what we need to deliver to these people who are, who haven't had their needs met over the years.
Chris, I'm not sure its heads have been in the sand. I think they've been up some other orifice. What I would say is that it seems that this is a problem that's not going away. It appears to be just increasing in size month by month. And as Hamish said, while our focus is elsewhere, this localized population is not being serviced.
Yeah, that's right. I think we touched on it last week in terms of referencing policymakers that are completely detached from reality. They have no experience. They're not going in and having a conversation with the people on the ground who are impacted. I was just having a conversation with someone the other day, and he was mentioning that exactly the same in the local council where we are, that they're looking to create some developments down the waterfront, and he operates. They volunteer at sites in and around the waterfront, and the council claimed that they've gone and had a conversation with these people and consulted with them, and they're like, no, the council turned up, talked at them, told them what was going to happen, and they're classing that as the consultation. So it's all over the place. These policymakers making decisions that impact the people on the ground without even engaging with them and pretending they have. So yeah, we've got some real issues going on.
I know that there are a number of councils that want to appear to be whiter than white, or want to appear to be cleaner than clean, and in fact, underneath the covers, there's any amount of dust that's been swept there. Wendy, is there an ongoing problem whereby there's a disconnect in communication between the policymakers and those affected by them?
Is the Pope Catholic? Absolutely, there are issues. And it so boggles the mind. Here, everywhere in the world, at some point, majority of people are going to end up elderly, and at the very least, even if they don't have a physical disability that they either are born with or encounter on their life journey, you would think that the policymakers would at least reference their parents or their grandparents and the struggles that they have had. That is probably the closest many of them will come to actually experiencing people who have these kinds of struggles. Why don't they actually even consider looking at building homes, which will be, or at least putting policies in place for the building of homes, which will service their parents and their grandparents? Is that really so hard to ask of the policymakers?
Hamish, in a world where I would say the majority of it lives in a familial setup, generational living being the norm, why is it so hard for the UK to see that that is a valid way to move forward? And also, would you take it home as well and help us wind it up for today?
I think there's a challenge. We don't look at it from a familial perspective in this country. Very, very fortunate to be present when Wendy was speaking about ideas moving forward, what can be done for generationally, for those generations to actually sort of look after each other. We haven't been encouraging it. But the strange thing is, it is this big divide between those that make the decisions and those of us who actually have to sort of survive as a consequence of those decisions. I was really hit earlier this week. I was listening in. I wasn't part of a podcast, maybe a surprise, but I was actually listening into a podcast earlier this week, and we had a group who called themselves the Welsh Gladiators. Now, of course, many of you will know the subject close to my heart, because I don't believe that either the elderly or those that have mobility challenges are particularly looked after when we look at these high-rise flats and all the rest of it. And they were saying, now, we may have suffered in England as a consequence of a political party allowing things to come and develop and evolve relative to cladding issues, which are a big thing, and they do impact on the very people we speak of.
Cladding Matters on Friday, please do attend. Sorry, shameless plug.
In Wales, the Senate of Wales has been the Labour for goodness knows how many years. Now, the thing is, they do not suffer. They have two cities, basically, which have flats or high-rise flats. Some of them have a lower level. We'll speak about these two particularly. They're Swansea and Cardiff. However, the Labour Party, given the opportunity to do something about those issues, have chosen not to bother. Now, that's the Labour Party making a political decision that it doesn't catch votes. So therefore, now, I think this is really, and the only reason I mention it isn't to get on this topic of sort of cladding again, but is to actually speak about a subject which somehow or other is enjoined with those that we need to look after in society, yet society isn't looking after because of the planning strategies which are being. How do we get our votes? How do we change this disastrous lack of popularity after a massive landslide victory into getting something positive happening? Well, at least we've given the elderly some kind of fuel allowance now. But what about helping them in their house? What about helping society, those in society that need the greatest level of support?
Oh, well, look, as ever, an excellent show from everyone. Thank you very much for that. And to all of you out there, please, we love it when you interact with us, and particularly would like some direction from you on what the sort of topics you'd like to talk about. But it falls to me to thank Juliet Babula of Gunner Cook, Chris Gilson of the Route Home, Wendy Gibson, of course, the First Time Buyers Club, and our Lord and Master, Hamish McClare of Search Convey. And to all of you out there, please keep your feet on the ground, keep reaching for the stars, and please try and look after that mental health. Until next week, bye-bye now.